So for the next two parts, we're going slightly off the rails. Um,
Remake.
So, here we are in this survivor camp outside of Sector 7, which definitely didn't exist in the original game because this play park area in the original game was completely empty of anything except
I love
debris
On Our
in the
Way.
original.
On Our Way is one of my favorite tracks in the game.
Yeah.
Is that a new track or an old track?
No, it's from the old game.
Okay, it sounds like the smooth jazz they play at bookstores.
Well, it was a theme you heard in Calm Village first, in the original game, and the remakes for the remixes for remake. There's like two of them. There's the jazz one that we're hearing right now, and there's the one used in
I think it also
cutscenes.
played in the Mount Nebel area when you were going across like the minecart roller coaster tracks.
Honestly, maybe this is just me because I only played the game once and I was a lot older when I played it. Final Fantasy VII's soundtrack didn't do a lot for me. Like it wasn't bad. It was fine. There was plenty of tracks that were like perfectly good for the moments they played. But outside of the super iconic pieces, One Wing Angel Air theme, Genova opening theme, I didn't feel like a lot stuck with me.
I think it would have been more impactful had you played it back in the day and our standards for like video game music instrumentation weren't so high because
It wasn't even about the quality for me. I did the compositions. I feel are
I don't
what
think
matter
that
to me.
it's. Here's the thing. Like I enjoyed Dragon Quest music that I heard in the terrible MIDI form in Dragon Quest VII. And if you've played the 3DS version of Dragon Quest VII, you know what I'm talking about because it's the music quality is awful. So it's not the instruments for me, it's the melodies. None of them, aside, again, from those extremely iconic pieces, not a lot of them stuck with me.
Well, okay, let me ask you a question, because I know that for a fact it has to do with just overall playtime in genres. I'm pretty sure I've played 7 a lot more than you have. Because 7 is one of my favorite soundtracks in Final Fantasy, like, period. But do you have a favorite Final Fantasy soundtrack?
4. Easily
4.
Easily Final Fantasy 4. Like, not even close.
I'm going to say that I don't get much from 4's soundtrack, to be honest.
Well, music is
I
fairly
love 4's
subjective,
soundtrack,
so I you know what, that's fine.
Final Fantasy IV soundtrack just sounds like an RPG soundtrack to me.
Yeah, but it's a super
yeah,
good...
because it's an RPG.
No, it gives me like no other actual impressions from the sound of the soundtrack.
like the town theme with the harp where it's like do 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 do.
Yeah, that's
Troya.
what I'm talking
so
about. That sounds so normal.
It's so pretty though. Hold on. So John, I have my Steam up right now. I can tell you how long my Final Fantasy playthrough was. Oh, it took me almost 40 hours to beat the game.
It sounds like a track that could fit in any RPG Maker project that I could possibly imagine up.
Yeah, but RPG Maker stems from Final Fantasy.
But that's the thing. RPG Maker usually comes with like a set of generic RPG tracks that you can just add into any project, right? And a lot of Final Fantasy IV's music feels like it would fit right in that kind of music.
Well,
pack.
I guess it's just because it's a fairly generic fantasy setting. It's got fantasy sounding music.
Yeah, it's pretty generic by today's standards, especially.
That's probably why Final Fantasy VII sticks out more in my mind than Final Fantasy IV soundtrack does, because Final Fantasy VII it was like very deliberately setting out to establish a setting that was entirely its own style and tone, and the music reflects that in a lot of places.
To me, and again, I don't really get super heated about music arguments, because music is to me one of the very few things that is almost entirely subjective.
Yeah.
Like obviously, like, if you're gonna say that when somebody literally slams on a keyboard, you like that sound, I'll raise my eyebrows for sure. But some people just don't like country music. They just don't. It doesn't jive with them. It's almost purely emotion. And so if you
I just don't like hearing songs about dirt roads and pickup trucks.
Okay, let me rephrase then. Music is subjective, lyrics aren't.
I'd rather hear, to be honest, I would rather hear music about dirt roads and pickup trucks than another fucking song about sex or drugs. But
no, because like it'd be different if One Wing Angel's Latin lyrics was dirt roads, pickup trucks.
Drink a beer with my bros.
Hey there, girl.
Buy your Ford.
When it comes to my music tastes, one of the things that I'll like, an example that will probably stand for all is like my reason for not liking the soundtrack of the Ratchet and Clank reboot is because if you listen to that music, it sounds like every freaking music track, every freaking like movie score you've ever heard in your life combined into one. And if you compare that to the music in the original Ratchet and Clank, where the music itself is very strongly leaning into the setting of the game, then that's where my subjective music tastes are. I want the music that is attached to my game to really be married into the concept of the game. And
No, that can work. Like I remember one of the big complaints about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was the way that they handled the music in that game, because instead of each theme for all the Marvel characters kind of sounding like that character's personality, for lack of a better word, it all sounded like generic movie scores. Captain America didn't have his theme song; he just played serious orchestral music.
When it comes to fighting game soundtracks, I definitely like the music to sound like the characters more than anything. Like even in like the newer Street Fighter games, like they have music for each individual stage, right? But whenever it gives me the option to do it, I always go into the options and say, no, play the character themes. And thankfully, Capcom
Kyle's
is smart
theme
enough
on everything.
Yeah, Capcom is smart enough to give you that option and let you just play the character themes rather than the stage themes, and so is Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive is very good about.
I think
letting-
Tekken 7
I
lets
would
you do
argue.
that too.
I would argue Capcom nowadays is more privy to that, because there was a time where they just went with stage themes rather than character themes, and you can argue for like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 it was a necessity because of the large roster. But by Tatsunoko versus Capcom, I think only the Japanese version of that game had character themes. The American version had stage themes.
Well, stage themes can also work because like if you're playing Smash Brothers or whatever and you're playing the Star Fox stage, you want to hear Star Fox music.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, for what it's worth, I like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 soundtrack.
I mean, unfortunately,
You know.
the problem with Smash Brothers is that you get everything else lumped into the other category. So you have, Golden Sun music playing on a Mii stage.
Yeah, that was the big issue with Ultimate is that you couldn't have the off-game songs that like fit or whatever for other series to work. Like the Tetris music for the Luigi's Mansion stage, because of how overly bombastic that version of Tetris is, it really actually kind of fit the Luigi's Mansion aesthetic. But now you just can't play it there anymore.
Yeah, so it's like put the Golden Sun thing with like Final Fantasy or Zelda or something.
Yeah,
It would work much better on those stages.
I think because of the necessarily repetitive nature of a fighting game's gameplay loop, the best way to handle the music in those kind of games is the way Dead or Alive handles it. Just give you the entire music list and let you select what plays where.
I think that I agree, because Tekken 7 does that. Tekken 7 lets you play any song on any stage at any time. I think, considering that Smash Brothers is a crossover game, there might be some weirdness going on there where maybe Sega doesn't want Capcom music on the Sonic stage. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you can do that for the Battlefields and Final Destination stages now.
You can put anything on Final Destination now?
Yeah, that was part of an update a while ago.
Huh, weird. Okay.
Apparently, when they did that, Sagar had to explain that they had to get the okay from all the license holders again.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, then that's probably why music is locked by stage. But, yeah, unfortunately, Smash is its own beast. It has its own hurdles to overcome.
And honestly, I think that the license holders would be a lot more likely to be like, okay, you can play Bayonetta music on Final Destination than you can play Bayonetta music on Wily Tower.
Mushroom Kingdom.
Yeah,
or
it's
Mushroom
like
Kingdom.
I don't think that the third parties really want the music playing on other third parties, if possible.
It's such an unrealistic quibble for the rights holders to have, though. We don't want our brand associated with this other brand in this crossover. What? Why? Why do you care?
You already have Bayonetta running around Green Hill. It's already happened.
It is not going to affect. It is not going to affect your sales or your brand recognition at all.
No, if anything, I think you can only go up because you're just increasing brand recognition.
I know that lawyers are really finicky with that kind of stuff. Oh, there it's dead. Okay, cool.
So just as we find Wedge, the floor in this underground facility collapses due to the structural damage of the plate falling, And we have actually a kind of interesting but also very easy sequence of Barret on his own.
We got all new content here for this
Yes,
part of the game.
this is the underground facility section, an area that may have existed in the original game, but you sure as hell didn't go here. And it sort of does tap into a concept that was in the original game that didn't get touched. When you're in Calm, you find that at the reactor there, Hojo is experimenting on humans and turning them into monsters. The most frustrating part about that sequence is that you never fight an enemy with that particular monster design. Ever. And this isn't that monster design, sorry to say. But we do get to...
Well, that monster design I always thought was incomplete anyway.
Yeah.
So I never expected you to fight like this monstrosity that was like one half human and like top
what do you
half
want
was,
from the vending machine, Wedge? They got Gatorade and Doritos.
20 chocolate smoothies.
They're gonna have to get you vanilla, Wedge. That okay?
and a Diet Coke.
It's Pepsi, Wedge. They only got Pepsi.
Oh, God damn it, Barret.
Anyway, like literally right before this sequence, you had an opportunity to buy a new weapon for Barret. So if you have not,
Big Bertha.
if you have not learned Maximum Fury by the end of the Barret only section, you're doing something wrong.
Great. Now, not after that exchange, I'm just imagining Barret taking the Avalanche crew on a late night run to like White Castle or something after a mission.
This is probably something that you're not going to
White
think to
Castle.
do at first, but yeah, Barret will just automatically soft lock on the breakable crates, so you can.
Yeah, he would need to. But it's like it's one of those things. Okay, we got to get Barret something to do. Just put a shitload of these tiny boxes here.
Barret.
Great, but you missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes.
God damn it!
Barret's kind of a frustrating character in terms of at least the original Final Fantasy VII story, in that he more exists to explain the circumstances, and he doesn't get a lot of. Okay, that is cute. Him singing the theme song, but he doesn't get a lot of development after the very beginning of the game. He exists mostly to set up the conflict in Midgar, and that's kind of just it.
He has his one arc.
I would argue against that.
but
Yeah.
but that's like.
He literally has an entire gameplay sequence dedicated to him in Coral.
Yeah, like he has his one
Yeah.
arc, and then he sort of falls off the story from that point on. He winds up being a B-list character as far as the narrative is concerned. After that point, he doesn't have the kind of continued significance that Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, even Kate Sith really tends to have to the story.
Yeah, because Barrett's strongest connections to the plot are in Midgar, because he ran Avalanche. He had connections to the community. He has a daughter there. And once you leave Midgar, none of that really matters a whole lot. So most of his scenes, he kind of just feels like the comic relief character. And that's kind of frustrating because it's a trap a lot of RPGs fall into. One I can think of off the top of my head is Dragon Quest VIII. Yangus is one of my favorite characters in that game. He has one of the strongest personalities. He's very charming and likable. And it's kind of a similar situation. After the beginning of the game, he doesn't do anything but be the butt of jokes until the end. And
Yangus is the bandit that you start off
he's
with. Right?
Yeah, he's the fat bandit with the hat.
Yes.
And he's got a really cool character arc at the beginning, and you get like a town sequence right after you get all 4 of your party members, where you get some development for him, and then he literally does nothing after
Dragon
that.
Quest VIII has less of an excuse than Final Fantasy VII, even because
There's
it's
only
cast,
4 characters.
Yeah, its cast is a lot smaller.
Yeah, 'cause I was going to argue is like the reason why I'm not so big on that is because I understand that given the game's robust cast of characters, you can only do so much given the setup and the amount of time you have. Because you can argue that, well, you should just find a better way to just integrate all these characters so that they're important. They're just as important in the end than they were in the beginning. But I also feel that, every character needs their arc, but
Certainly.
not every character.
Not every
yeah.
character needs to be super important to the story, even ones that aren't
Yeah.
like optional. Like some
Yes.
characters can have shorter arcs. It's just that in terms of RPGs, Final Fantasy VII doesn't have that big of a cast.
The what it comes down to, though, really is that because of PS1, SNES eras Final Fantasy games and the way that they were typically paced. They have a tendency to they have a tendency to focus in on one character at a time. And while other characters often have input on what is going on, it is a very small amount of input compared to whichever single character or pair of characters in some cases the story is currently focused on. Whereas in this kind of slower paced, more meticulous story that we see in Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy XII or even Final Fantasy XIII, for as bad as its storytelling was, all of the characters are at any given time saying things and showing emotion in ways that they would not be able to in those older games. So they tend to have a bit more staying power in your consciousness, even if they're not technically doing much more than they would be doing in those original games.
Yeah, like, thinking about Final Fantasy 13, like, that game does also have a kind of similar sort of thing where there is the Snow section where Snow gets a lot of development, and then there's a Hope section where Hope gets a lot of development or whatnot. Afro Dude, like, he's sort of similar to Barret in that he doesn't really do anything after his sad scene where, oh, my kid got turned into an ice sculpture. He kind of just does nothing for the rest of the game. Same thing with Australian girl, like, after her, what's it? Fang. That's her name. Fang. Like, after you figure out, like, what her deal is, she doesn't really do much after that either.
She kind of just hangs around until plot brings her back into significance at the very end.
And it's honestly, those storytelling structures can work. It just depends on how the game does it. Like, Final Fantasy VI, I'm not a huge fan of how that game does the second half of its stories, but...
Well, that's because of just how the game's structured, though.
In Final Fantasy XIII's case, even though the characters are portrayed in kind of not good ways, because there is some value to be added to these kinds of stories by upping the technology and upping the cinematic presentation of everything. Because even if the rest of the cast isn't technically doing a whole lot for the story at a given time, you're getting more like nuanced feedback onto how they're reacting to whatever's going on around them, and that does go a long way toward keeping them front and center in the player's consciousness as entities within the plot. Whereas, like, if everyone is a bobblehead, the only input you really get is when the game specifically has them say something insightful.
Yeah. The big problem in Final Fantasy XIII's case is that it has, like, maybe one likable character in the cast.
And it's the one that is the least important to the entire trilogy, yeah.
Yes.
It's Saz. I don't think they meant Saz to be the most interesting and likable character in their cast, but god dang it, he managed it. But, like, okay, yeah. But it's worth bringing up Final Fantasy XIII in particular as my example in this case, because Final Fantasy XIII is a case where even the characters who are being focused on at a given time aren't being handled very well. So the failure in 13's case kind of does do a lot to underline what its strengths actually are when they show up.
If you compare the cinematography and the general writing of this game to, at the very least, the first Final Fantasy 13, because I have not seen much of the second or third one. It is miles, and I mean, granted, being better than Final Fantasy 13 is not a high bar, and it's not just being better than Final Fantasy 13 is not something to celebrate, but it is worth pointing out that it's way better. Like, just the way that the characters are much less puppet-like. The way that they're acted is frankly just better as well. The writing is worth a damn too.
Why did they have to put Gorgers in a section where you only have one character? God damn. But it's worth comparing 7 Remake to Final Fantasy 13 because a lot of the good ideas from Final Fantasy 13 do make a return in 7 Remake, and they're handled infinitely better here. So comparing the strengths and weaknesses of both games does make for an interesting game design and narrative design conversation to have.
Yeah, it's also, I think, Final Fantasy 13 is an instance where it's more complicated than just haha Final Fantasy 13 bad. Lol, 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 lol.
Yeah.
Like, it's legitimately one of those interesting kind of games to study in that there is... I don't think people would have been so upset about it if there weren't things that showed promise
Yeah.
in that game, you know? Like, if it was just bad, like, in the same way that, oh god, I don't know, any other random kind of game is, like, or even Paper Mario Sticker Star. Like, that game's bad, but the way it's bad isn't that interesting. So it's not really all that fun to talk about. Whereas Final Fantasy 13 is interesting, at the very least, in what it does right and wrong. So there's more to talk about there.
Depending on that squandered promise, though, that could also just add salt to the wound, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where it's so obvious that this could have been like this or this, and they didn't capitalize that from the get-go.
I mean, I guess that's true, but the game's also 10 years old now, so, or more,
Yeah.
maybe. So I feel like we're at
It
the
came
point
out
where...
2000.
No, it's not 10 years old yet.
No, not yet.
Are you sure?
not yet.
I thought
Soon.
it was like 2011 the game came out. Hold on.
Maybe.
To the
Alright, hold on.
Google Mobile.
Also, just as an aside while they're doing that, I know they would never do it, but whenever it comes to PC, someone make a mod where if you break all the boxes, it just warps Barret to a platform. It says, "Congratulations, you got to jump." Da-da-da.
The game is turning 12 this
Yeah,
year.
Oh, God damn
Japan, December 17th, 2009. Worldwide, March 9th, 2010. Oh, it's its birthday! Happy birthday, Final Fantasy 13.
So happy for it.
Oh, man, it's 11 years old now. I can't wait.
Where's the birthday cake? Only Zaz gets to blow it out then.
What about the chocobo living in his hair? Can he blow too?
Sure.
Yeah, somebody wake Sarah up.
No, leave her she's more interesting as a statue.
As a rock.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 13, though, my God,
Can we not?
going back to that game, we're gonna have to do a commentary at some point, John.
Are we?
I know.
Here's the thing. I don't want to do a 60-part commentary on a
Suddenly,
game
I don't
like
want to be
that,
a part of
though.
BrainScratch anymore.
Sorry guys, I got tuberculophemia. I can't be a commentator anymore.
Yeah, looking at images of Snowvilliers' face, it gives me seizures. So,
It's
Oh my God.
it's more just that the game's a million years long, even if we edited it down to pieces.
yeah,
you
it
know,
kind of is.
It's like I don't want to do a playthrough for that long.
It's unfortunate though, because like 13-2 and Lightning Returns would both be legitimately interesting games to commentate over, but you got to do 13-1 first.
Yeah.
So, man, or you could just watch Clement's videos on all three games. That would.
I mean, we don't really have a statute of limitations on this sort of shit because, I mean, I think I speak for everybody that we're doing this until we die, right? I don't know what's going on.
We're gonna be
BrainScratch.
we're gonna be like the 2060 version of Skyrim Grandma, just Metroid grandpas.
How do you do, fellow children?
Maybe by 2040 I can get us to do another Trauma Center game. We'll see. No? Okay.
Will it take you until 2040 to do a Travis?
What hip new genre are we doing today in the year 2050? It's still Fortnite. God damn it.
Finally, the 16th Mania playthrough.
Okay. Oh, John, you mentioned that, but I'm still very salty that we didn't get a new Trauma Center game in the Wii U era. Like, that's literally the last time we could have gotten one, and we didn't.
Listen, they brought back, not that they're the same kind of game, but when they announced those Famicom visual novels for the Switch, I was like, man, anything's fair game.
Yeah,
now.
but
They're gonna
it's
keep
just
doing that
that's
shit.
a visual novel. That's easy to port. I don't know how you.
That's
get
what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying they're not the same thing.
I don't know how you get the Trauma Center control scheme to work on a normal controller.
I mean, the Joy-Cons have motion control. You could do something with that.
Yeah, but they desync really quickly. And
No, I'm not saying it would be perfect, but you could, in theory, do something with it.
yeah, I don't want to play a Trauma Center game where the pointer's desyncing, because it was minorly annoying in Pikmin where it's not that important. In Trauma Center, it's an Atlas game,
I
so
get the
it's
feeling
very
that-
important.
I get the feeling that the controller's desyncing actually comes down to like the individual game's programming more than the controllers themselves.
It's
not that
probably a little
simple.
bit of column A and a little bit of column B, I would imagine, because if you're not doing an IR pointer, it's just going to desync eventually because it's a gyroscope. And if we move our hand weird and then recenter it somewhere else, it's just going to happen. I don't know how you would fix it, but I'm also not a tech kind of guy. It would be interesting to see them try to make button controls for it, because they'd be terrible. But I'd love to see them try. I mean, if they can get Skyward Sword to get button controls, I guess anything's technically possible.
I mean, we'll see how that goes over, considering we haven't played the game yet.
I can't wait.
I mean, honestly, it seems like about as good of a system as you can get. Like,
Yeah, it's a matter of will that be fun to play is the thing, and not just a compromise to make it work without motion controls.
I mean, at the very least,
That's kind of the question here.
I think the only reason why they even added the button controls at all was because there are Switches without Joy-Cons. So there are some Switches that literally cannot play the game otherwise.
Yeah. Well, you have the Switch Lite, so
Yeah, that's what I mean. Although, I guess that didn't stop them before, because Mario Party on Switch requires sideways Joy-Cons, and if you play it on a Switch Lite, you can't get past the title screen. It just does not work.
Oops.
Why are you shooting, Tifa?
we're shooting the door, not
She,
Tifa.
look,
friendly fire. Don't worry
she's
about
in
it.
the way, okay? She needs to, like, not do that.
Oh, so Tifa can survive Gatling gun fire to the face, but Jessie, oh no, her grenade. Oh man, I'm gonna die from the grenade.
Yeah, but we've agreed though that Jesse's not dead.
I mean, she didn't like die off screen. She pretty clearly died on screen.
Well, so did Biggs.
No, Biggs collapsed on screen too. He's alive.
Yeah, but she did like the with the hand fall
did Biggs.
daintily.
So did Biggs.
Oh, wait, really? I don't remember him
Yeah.
dying as daintily and dramatically though. in the-
Daintily?
Well, you know, like the woman dying scene in all of the movies and stuff. It's just like, oh, help me! They're being held in the man's arms, and then their head slumps and their arms.
She even made a crack about that.
Yeah, it's like it's such a trope to this
Yeah,
point.
and she's an actress, so she knows the trope, so she got to make a wisecrack about it. It was pretty touching, you know.
Yeah, so
painful
it's I don't know. I think that she's probably dead, but until you buy the $7.99 Save Jessie DLC, and then she'll come back.
Okay.
7 Remake 99 DLC.
Yeah, that just makes me think I need to play that. What's it called? The Final Fantasy VII mod. New threat, because Jessie is
The new threat, yeah.
They turned Jessie into like a guest party member in that one.